Hello and welcome to OUTFRONT. Please feel free to have a seat. We're going to go ahead and get the panel started. I'm Victoria Modishard, Vice President of Marketing here at OUTFRONT and co-founder of our Women's Employee Resource Group. At OUTFRONT, our purpose is to help people, places, and business grow stronger, and we start with our own people and the greater media industry. The 2025 theme for Women's History Month is Moving Forward Together, and it's conversations like these today and the connections that we're making that take those steps to move us forward. It's an honor for the second year in a row to be partnering with Ad Age to really celebrate diverse perspectives. Hopefully all of you have had the chance to read the inspiring essays by all these panelists across Ad Age this month. They include themes about embracing the complexity of our differences, the balance between creativity and business, optimizing our time and our focus, and creating meaningful experiences and fostering connections, and many more. Definitely check those out across Ad Age. So thank you for attending, and I'll turn it over to Janine Pochi, Editor-in-Chief at Ad Age, to introduce this inspiring panel. So thank you again.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy to be back here in the OUTFRONT space. Thank you so much to OUTFRONT for this partnership. Love bringing everyone together to learn from each other, to inspire one another, and have these wonderful ladies here to share their knowledge and their experience, which is really what this is all about. So we hope you learned something. Definitely go to adage.com. We have our essays from these ladies, and Esther's is going up tomorrow. So we have a couple of more rolling out, and we appreciate your support, so thank you. So joining me today, we have Esther Mariah Tejada, CMO of EM Strategic Partners, Taryn Crothers, President of Attention. We have Dana Hork, founder and CEO at Beers with Friends, and Lily Geiger, founder of Figlia. Thank you, ladies, for joining me.
Thank you.
So, Taryn, I want to start with you. In your essay, I loved what you talked about, the 80-20 leadership rule and the idea of firing yourself from certain jobs, certain tasks. The idea of women doing it all is something that has definitely been persistent and is hard to break away from, of saying, okay, no, this task I can delegate, this task, it doesn't need to happen. Can you talk a little bit about that idea and how you sort of train yourself or teach yourself to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think, first of all, thank you for having me, and honored to be on the stage with these incredible women. I think for a really long time, I always thought professionally, if I work harder and do more, I'll be able to rise up. And I got to a point where I was working as many hours as I possibly could. There were no more hours left in the day, and there had to be something that gave. And I had to change my own mindset from being an employee really to being a CEO, even if I wasn't in at the time that CEO or leadership role. And I think that for me was the opportunity where all of a sudden I started to raise and elevate my own career professionally, and I fired myself from all of the things that were in my job that I was doing, but that wasn't actually serving me, and it wasn't serving what I needed to accomplish day to day. And so I think that mindset of not what are the tasks in your jobs, but really what's the impact that you need to make, and how do you make sure that you're focusing your time only on the things that are going to drive impact and cut the rest, because quite frankly, it's all irrelevant if you're not able to accomplish that. So I think that mindset shift for me was a game changer.
Esther, have you experienced that before, of the need to sort of push back, give up, and how have you navigated that?
Yeah, so I think, 100% what Taryn just said. I think in general, women are socialized, and this is especially so for women of color, to do the hard work, keep your head down, work hard. And there's this unspoken expectation that a magical career fairy is going to come down and see how hard you're working and say, you know what, you deserve this amazing promotion that you didn't even ask for, or maybe you did ask for, et cetera. It doesn't work that way. We all come to a point in our career where we realize it doesn't work that way. And what I'm actually doing is burning myself out. For me, I have become very intentional about the things that I say yes to, and just as intentional about the things that I say no to. There's no shortage of work to do, right? There's plenty to do. If you want to take it on, it'll be there for you to take on. The key is, though, to ask yourself these questions. Is, to your point, this work impactful for the business? Is this work high value work that is also high visibility? And I think selfishly, and we have to be comfortable with the selfish part of this, is this work going to help me further my career? And if the answer to all three of those questions is not a yes or very close to yes, then the answer should be no. And that took a while to get to that, to the point of being able to artfully say that in certain rooms.
Have any of you ever felt that you put the brand, the company you've worked for, your employees above that? Above that, does this better myself and better my career? Have anyone ever felt that? Really?
Yeah, definitely, all the time. I mean, I'm running like a 2.5 person team, and it's my company, it's my personal story. I'm constantly putting the business and the well-being of my employees in front of myself, and I think that it's really important what you're saying, and sometimes really hard to do, especially as a young person. I think that you're taught to just, you're not senior enough to relax yet, or you need to grind, but it's true. Like you're a human being, and you're a person behind this company. So
yeah. So Dane, how do we break the cycle? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Of like, okay, the belief persists that women do more to get ahead. But how do you break that for the next generation of leaders?
Yeah, well, I think starting with what you all have shared with setting goals and being intentional about what it's going to take to get there is step one. And then I think a thing that we can all do, and I know I've done, is surround myself with the people, the process, and the tools to put that into motion. So people, for example, my co-founder and my agency Beers with Friends, if my superpower is quickly seeing all of the things we could be doing and all of the impact that it could have, he's excellent at saying, here are the fewest things that would have the highest impact. So surrounding yourself with people who balance you out in that way is really important. From a process perspective, figure out how to plan your year, your month, your week, and your day in a fashion where you're able to prioritize what's going to have the highest impact and continually revisit that list so that it's always evolving and it constantly reflects what's right in front of you. And then from a tools perspective, there's a lot of tools out there now, whether it's to-do list managers or AI, which I'm sure we'll get to, but put in place some tools that can help you. One of my friends was teasing me that I'm in a very small segment of people who pays for a corporate a tool called Asana for my own personal to-do list. Right? It's great because it helps me manage all the projects. For everything that I have going on at work, I've got a whole bunch of stuff happening outside of work, and those tools really help me prioritize and move through everything that needs to get done.
Let's stay with the AI conversation. Obviously, there's the practicality, right? The ability to offload certain tasks to help free you up for different tasks in leadership. But there's also the responsibility of a leader of empowering your employees to embrace AI in whatever way that makes sense for your brand, your company. Taryn, could you talk a little bit about how you're navigating that and the role of AI in leadership right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm obsessed with the topic of AI, as Janine knows. I run a creative agency and creative company, and there are lots of conversations around how AI could potentially be impacting the workforce. And what I tell our team is there are going to be two people professionally. There are going to be the people that embrace AI and that have a long-standing future, and there are going to be the people that do not and need to find a new job. Full stop. I don't think we should sugarcoat. I think that's just the reality of where it is. Now, that doesn't mean AI is replacing what we're doing creatively. It means it is a tool that we need to learn and use so that we can be more effective and be more impactful. And just to follow up on the previous point around how we make sure that everyone is focused on being as impactful as possible, I think as a leader, one of my biggest priorities is to make sure that I am encouraging and recognizing impact as opposed to effort. And I know that sounds tough, because when someone works really hard and they don't get the result, we're there, emotionally to encourage them and to support them. But when we think about impact, if you're recognizing impact, then that's ultimately going to drive not I worked 75 hours last week, but I was able to complete the thing I needed to complete. And I think that mind shift is really important from a leadership standpoint.
And there's certainly like a lot of fear around AI, especially perhaps if you're a more junior level employee, of some of the tasks that you typically do being taken away from you. Esther, how do you sort of assure people that this is not a replacement, and how do they have to think about their jobs moving forward if there are tasks that they are offloading?
I think in a way it is a replacement. It's not a replacement of the human being and the thought. It's a replacement of the task and the way that that human being approaches the task. And that's a pretty significant difference from what a lot of us, or a lot of especially junior folks, think about when they think replacement. Here's the thing, the fear around AI is not a new thing. Human beings have fear around any major shift in culture, in technology. We had fear when email became a thing. I mean, this is way before a lot of people's time, but there was fear when email became a thing. We had tremendous fear, this is before everybody's time, but there was tremendous fear of the Industrial Revolution, for example, when things became automated through machinery. That's the human condition. We fear change and we fear what it means for us. Here's the other thing though, is like anything else that's been created through technology, eventually we'll all learn to just incorporate it in our day-to-day life in the same way that we use computers for everything, that we stop using fax machines and we send emails, and the same way that we have portable phones instead of landlines, and it's just going to be the way that we do business. So this is the ugly, painful process of getting to that place, and this is exactly what I tell more junior people. Learn to use the tools. There was a time when we didn't have Excel and people were, doing calculations by hand, and now we still have accountants, right? We still have a finance team, and they're using Excel. So this is the exact same. This is analogous. It is the same thing, and I find that does put it into perspective for folks. And I also think from a business perspective, there has to be a greater investment industry-wide to support that shift from where we were to where we need to be, so that these tools are part of, the everyday toolkit that we have at our disposal.
Janine, if you don't mind me building
of
on
course.
that. So there's a framework that we talk about a lot. I don't know if you've heard it, but it's forming, storming, norming, performing. And so I think we normalize how uncomfortable everyone is inside of our company at attention with AI through that framework. So forming, this is brand new, everyone is feeling this way. Storming, I have no idea how to use these tools, I don't know how to integrate them into my workflow. Mm-hmm. That's okay. That anxiety, it's AI anxiety.
As though we need more anxiety.
As though we need more. We have a dance now to go with it. But that is normal. And I think just making sure that everyone knows that what they're going through is normal and is okay. We'll get to the forming stage and then ultimately the performing stage. And the incredible thing about this is we all now have access to a personal assistant. And so that is it truly is a gift if you change your mindset. Yeah.
I want to talk about that a little bit in terms of mindset, right? Because half of the battle is the mindset in which you approach things. We talk a lot about the way you approach it in a business setting, but a lot of what we do is deeply personal, right? And it's navigating both the personal and professional. Lily, I'm curious, because you just said it before, like your business is born out of the personal. How do you could share a little bit of your story, but also, how do you talk about that both from a business of what you can achieve, but also that this is deeply personal to you?
Yeah, I think there's a balance, and I definitely touched on that in my Ad Age essay article. But I essentially started Filia, which is a non-alcoholic aperitivo, kind of like a Campari or Aperol, because I lost my parent to alcohol addiction. And having grown up with an alcoholic parent, seeing, a restaurant or bar setting back in the day, the only option was a non-alcoholic beer, and oftentimes non-alcoholic beers just taste like real beer. So it's super triggering, it can feel like a setback, and I set out to start this company because of that. So I think that what can feel hard is that sometimes I'm just telling the story like it's, you know, it's the marketing pitch and it's just like a script, and I talk a lot about that. And that is weird, right? Because I lived this and it's traumatic and it's of course really upsetting, but it's really powerful to see just the feedback that I get from people, customers, fans of the brand, you know, just community members of the brand, say that they feel comfortable talking about it because I have. And so, yeah, to feel like I'm making an impact on people is the reason why I'm doing it. And I think there is a balance, like, you know, to how much you really want to talk about this when you're, you know, still leading a brand. You know, there is some unsexiness to this topic when you're selling a product, and it, like I said also in my article, like that can't be shown on the shelves. It really is the only thing about us that you kind of have to figure out if you like check our social media or you read our brand story on the website. But it is the brand, ultimately. It is why we're here, so.
Dana, how are you navigating the personal in the office? There's been so much uncertainty over the last, you know, few years in particular. There's a whole generation that has never necessarily worked in an office or are, you know, learning the ropes of how to navigate being in person. There's uncertainty currently in the current environment, socially, politically, that we live in. How are these things reflected in the conversations that you have? How are you balancing some of these conversations, you know, internally?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, and I think from my perspective, I've always looked at people as sort of whole humans, right? We come to work and we contribute there. We have lives outside of work, and I think for a long time, you know, folks have been asked to kind of hide their out of work selves from what's happening in the workplace. And now, for a whole multitude of reasons, you know, our work lives and our personal lives are deeply intertwined. And you know, maybe it's because we have a phone that unless you separate and have two different phones, it's all sitting there on one device. Your brain is not divided in two. You're flipping back constantly between thinking about a work problem and maybe putting your kid to bed. And so everything's just come together. And I think, you know, workplaces that really celebrate the full wholesomeness of a person and the full life of a person, I think those are cultures that people are going to want to work at. I think people really do want to bring who they are completely to the office. And like I said, I think companies that celebrate that are going to win.
Esther, how are these conversations taking place, you know, for you and with you and people you work with?
Yeah, I agree with that. I have always had a cringe kind of reaction to when people say, you know, it's just business. That's never been real. Nothing is just business. You do business with human beings. It's two people at a negotiating table. It's two people in a conference room. It's two people at a meeting. I think the "it's just business" sort of tagline has been a horrible excuse to get away with really bad, terrible human behavior. And so I've never subscribed to that because I don't do business. I don't do business with a business. I do business with the other person on the other side of the table. And so I do agree that organizations, and this doesn't necessarily have to be like soft and fuzzy, and I think it has a soft and fuzzy feeling sometimes that clouds what we're really talking about. But for me, I think the recognition that what drives a business are the human beings that are running the business, and that the importance of those relationships is what makes or breaks the success of many businesses. If we would all recognize and acknowledge that in the way we run our teams, we would have much more high-performing and successful businesses across the board, full stop. It doesn't mean I have to have a pizza party for everybody and a ping pong table in my office necessarily, but it does mean that we need to put a bigger premium on those interpersonal business relationships in the same way that we put them on our personal friendships. And actually, for me, a lot of my business relationships become personal friendships. So there's that blurry line. Yeah. I think there's also a fine line between that and what we're seeing with a much younger demographic of folks that are coming into the workforce that have never worked in an office setting before. And so the pendulum is swinging way over to the other side. And so what we need to do is find some kind of middle ground where there can be an intergenerational workforce, where there's that respect and also where we see each other, we're people.
Taryn, what do you think about that? How do you create the space for these personal or heavy conversations? And you and I have talked about talking to and how we bring up Gen Z or younger employees in the current environment. How do you sort of navigate that?
Yeah, for me, it's all about listening better. One of my mentors told me this acronym that I really love, which is WAIT, which stands for Why Am I Talking? And I think there are a lot of leaders the best leaders who come to these conversations and they say very little, but the fact that they are there and actively listening makes all the difference in the world for the employee base. And oftentimes I'll come to those conversations and start the conversation with, help me understand what you need from me. Do you need me to hear and be a voice to listen to you, or do you need me to help solve a problem? Because those are two very different
I love that.
directions.
Yeah.
And sometimes people just need to vent in a safe space, and that's great and that's okay, and I'm happy to be that for them. And sometimes they need to actually solve a problem, and I think if you truly just listen to what they need from you, then you can have a much deeper and more impactful conversation with them.
That's great. Lily, I want to talk about a little more of your essay. You talked about moments of self-doubt or imposter syndrome. I think everyone can probably relate to that in some way. Which strategies have you used to sort of like push through those moments?
I think definitely remembering why I'm doing it. Luckily, it's a personal story. It definitely is something I deeply care about. I think working with a therapist or a coach or just talking to someone, your friends, I think half the time I get in my own head and the thoughts in my head are not even legitimate. They don't make sense, and if I'm not with the right people to kind of talk me down from that ledge in the moment, it can build up, and then I'll actually really believe that. And so yeah, I think it's really about who you surround yourself with, kind of similar to what we're all talking about. It's like I happen to work with two of my really good friends, and I think that really helps me have the courage to do a lot of these things, to feel like they believe in me.
Dana, similar question, how do you navigate that when those thoughts, I think we all can relate to being in our head and overthinking things. I think that is probably another very similar feeling. How do you navigate those times?
I just remind myself, nobody knows what they're doing. We do. We have expertise, we have experience, we bring all of that with us, but everyone's also just figuring it out. And it's okay to be a student and not an expert sometimes. I think, it's sometimes hard to remind yourself it's okay to be curious and not know everything, but we're all learning, and I think leaders that connect and relate are ones that show some of that vulnerability, that show, hey, I'm learning too, hey, let's work through this together. I think that people really connect with those types of leaders, and I just remind myself we're all figuring it out, and if I can model my own doubts or insecurities for others, that can actually help someone else feel more comfortable doing the same.
Yeah, a lot of the words that are coming up too are the community, the people you surround yourself with. I think you mentioned mentor before. Esther, I'm curious, thoughts on the importance of having a mentor, being a mentor, and how women leaders in particular should be thinking about that.
Well, I'll get to that in just a second, but I want to touch on the imposter syndrome thing for just a minute. Listen. The amount of times that I've been in a new room and I think before I step in, oh God, I'm gonna be way over my skis, and then I get in the room and I'm like, this is it? This is it? It's astounding, right? And so what I have learned over time is that, this is my philosophy, imposter syndrome was not invented by women.
No.
I hate imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome is not a thing.
Word.
Yeah, women didn't invent this. Imposter syndrome comes from other people projecting whatever their bias is on women, and then women saying, could it be true? Mm-hmm. That's what this is, because I know for a fact I've never actually walked into something and where I felt truly unprepared. What I did have was a bunch of noise in my head about what other people may have said or have suggested or gathered from the media or I've gathered from osmosis of a culture of a place. So I want to just say that's my feeling on this whole imposter syndrome thing. Mentorship is hugely important. So I have been a mentor for many people. I have been a mentee for many people, and I can say unequivocally that most things in my career would not have happened if I did not have an amazing woman leader somewhere in an organization either sponsoring me or giving me advice officially or unofficially through a program or otherwise. It is the only way. And by the way, it is the way most men have gotten to where they have gotten for the past 150, 200 years. Okay, it's not a new thing. Everyone's been doing it. We all need to do it too. And so what I do is I actually seek out to build relationships with women in particular, in organizations where I see that spark. I know they've got it, maybe they don't know they've got it, I think they've got it, and it doesn't have to be a formal kind of constructed thing, but it does have to be an investment. And so that's one, and the other thing is sponsorship is something else, and sponsorship is also important. You need to make the relationships with people that have a seat at the table that can bring you into the room. And that's not always another woman, right? And so you have to find those allies, but full stop, single most important thing, I think it's having those relationships in place.
Going back to what Esther was talking about around the imposter syndrome and the need for women to often overprove themselves, right, in the workplace. Taryn, how do you navigate that? To Esther's point about imposter syndrome was not created by a woman. Similarly, women are often not given a role until they prove themselves in a way that is not necessarily always true for a man. How do you navigate that pressure?
There are layers upon layers of that question. So, look, I think for me, I also really hate the phrase imposter syndrome because I think there's implicit bias that goes into it. I know that I am where I am because I am the best person for the job, and I have been able to achieve what I've achieved. And so I always, now have I questioned, do I know all the answers? Absolutely not, but I'm confident enough in my ability to make decisions and to be a leader that I can bring people to the table that fill my gaps. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about imposter syndrome and the reasons that it has come about, I think there are two layers to that. One, there is a double standard, an extra standard around likability for women leaders. Oh, yeah. And you can be confident and make decisions and not be nice or accommodating. And I think you have to just let that go. I'm confident in the fact that I have grown our company through acquisition. We have double-digit increases. We have strong EBITDA, all of the numbers and the metrics that we need. And it's okay if people don't like me because I'm effective at my job. And so you have to be able to divorce yourself from that and be confident in that. I think that's one. And then on the other side of the coin, you need to find a group of people where you have a safe space, speaking of mentorship, where you can then let it go and be free with where you need help, where you have gaps to fill that in. And I think it's that constant balance of external and internal, and it's just an interesting thing to navigate.
Yeah, and just to build on that, you asked a question about mentorship, and I think that's super important. I also think it's important to cultivate a network of your peers, to have that advisory board in your life that you can tap into over and over. I think that's so critical. So you kind of have to both manage up and down, but you really need to open your arms and extend out and cultivate a community around you. Yeah.
Lily, you left a more traditional job to become an entrepreneur and build your business. What advice would you give to other women making that leap? What were the hardest adjustments for you, and what did you need to figure out?
I would say, when I started, I think, I truly had no idea what I was doing from an operational, financial, like pretty much everything, but maybe the marketing side, which is not going to get you a brand, unfortunately. It can get you pretty far, but it's not going to do the whole job. And I think just being scrappy, like just not thinking that you're too good for any part of the business, and just being ready to kind of take any job within that company in stride. A lot of the work I do is the stuff that you see going into emails and you know, any demo ever really is coming from me. You'll see me in Whole Foods for 3 hours slinging drinks. My back is broken and I'm also emailing with like my pinky. Like, you just gotta be able to just do it all, and then you'll actually understand your business a lot more because of that. And I think that's kind of been my superpower. And I just want to go back to the last point you made, or just, you know, about imposter syndrome and everything. One thing that has really helped me, and I kind of just said this to myself one day because I was panicking. Like, you just have so many ups and downs of the business. And I said, okay, what is the worst possible case scenario that could happen here? It's okay that the business fails and this is all over. It's like, okay, then I will just go on with my life and I'll do something else. It's like, you just can't like put that much weight also on this. Like, we are human. And so I just want to say that because I think a lot of people don't actually go there. You're like, oh, well, if I just go there mentally and I prepare myself for that, like, the rest of this is going to be totally okay.
I think that leads into like a really great question here of like, how do you prioritize what truly matters? You know, you talking about what is the worst case scenario? Okay, I'll pick myself up. Then how do you really prioritize, this is what matters in my life and this is what matters in my job, and here is how I sort of separate that or not, because I don't know if separating it is the right word anymore, but it's managing both. And I don't like to use the word balance because I don't believe that there is ever a balance, so I refuse to say that word, but I will say manage it. Anyone wants to jump in?
I'll jump in there. So I have a 6-year-old daughter who I had later in life, and did not think I would ever be a mom. It was like not on my to-do list. And she's amazing and I love her. But what that has done for me professionally is really interesting and unexpected, in that it has really brought into focus why I work. Yeah. And I don't mean that from a perspective of, you know, providing for my child and all those things. I mean, obviously, yes, tactically, that's what's happening. But I now understand at a much deeper level that by me showing up every day to a business and being in a C-suite role and being in boardrooms and being in management team meetings, and this being an example, a model that my daughter can see as a small Hispanic girl in particular, is changing the trajectory of her life, and also the narrative she's telling herself and the narrative that she's able to share with others. And so I think in a way it's really made me realize that just being in the room sometimes and letting people see you be in the room has this huge impact on other people that I was only really thinking about myself, right? Up until that point. So it's not a balance at all, to your point, but it has added a level, interestingly, it has added a level of, this is way bigger than me, right? This is not even about me. This is about, can other little girls imagine themselves in this seat because they see someone else who's also a woman in that seat? And that there's an intrinsic value to that doesn't have a number, doesn't have a salary, it doesn't have a house and a car and a lifestyle associated with it. But what it does have is a dream that comes with it, and the ability to unlock dreams for really little girls. And that has been amazing for me.
I love that. I have a ton of other questions, but I want to be mindful of time. I don't know if anyone else, if we want to open in questions, and we could go back if anyone has questions. I could keep going. All right, back there.
Hi, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. I just wanted to ask, like, do you believe that not everybody is meant to be an entrepreneur? And like, what are your, let's say, top 3 skills that's like the perfect entrepreneur woman or perfect business woman possess? Thank you.
Lily, you want to
me, the perfect entrepreneur.
Yeah,
yes, I will answer that
you
question.
being the perfect
Of course,
entrepreneur.
yes, she's referring to me. Right.
Yes.
Right. I have never been more humbled and brought to my knees than I have from doing this. So I think you just got to be ready for that. And like I said, I just wouldn't, you can't take yourself too seriously because everything is going to go wrong before it goes right most of the time. And I think you should probably care enough about what you're doing or feel that you are good enough at what you're doing if you don't really care about it to calculate, maybe this is the right move for me being an entrepreneur. And will this be something I want to do for a while? Like, usually it doesn't end after a year. You got to keep doing it, and maybe you exit your company, or maybe you run your company for however long. But I think you got to be prepared you're stuck with it, especially if you're the one starting it. It's very hard to just like one day disassociate from this position. So I would say that. And I don't know what makes the perfect entrepreneur. I know you're looking to me for that advice, but I think you just gotta be ready to do it.
Let's talk about that word, perfect entrepreneur, because I think it was interesting that you used the word perfect, and it was actually one of my questions of like this cycle of perfectionism. That is definitely a feeling strongly felt. How do you break that, and how do you break, I often hear, I have a 10-year-old daughter, and I often hear her use that word, this is not perfect. Mm-hmm. And it has been a long time struggle of like defining what that is and what that means. And I know I feel that in my own self. So talking about young girls growing up and thinking about this has to be done perfectly. You need to be the perfect entrepreneur in order to be an entrepreneur, which is most certainly not true. I'm assuming you would agree with that.
I definitely, I don't.
So can we talk about the word perfect and how that has, framed your thinking, or how you sort of break out of that?
I'm happy to start.
Yeah, go ahead, Taryn.
So pre-attention, I had a startup myself, raised around a seed round, invested a lot personally, ended up giving all of the money back, and then went back into corporate America. I call it my startup MBA. It was the best thing that I ever did for many, many reasons. And I've always loved building. I think in order to be not perfect, but a successful entrepreneur, you have to love building things. There are many people who have ideas. There are very few who know how to execute. And execution does not come with overnight success. So what you see on LinkedIn or on Instagram or, Substack, whatever it is that you're consuming these days, and podcasts where you look at entrepreneurs and think, it's a year or 2 years and all of a sudden, that is not the story. These people are hustling day in and day out. They are truly grinding, and you have to just love building. And that building is not for everyone. I talk a lot about building. I'm a builder. That it is my why, and it's why I've been at the company for nearly a decade at this point, because I find it fun. It's sick, but fun. And you can look back every 6 months and see how much you have built and grown. That is not for everyone. If that is something that is deeply in your core and gives you satisfaction, the high highs and the low lows, then you should be an entrepreneur. If it does not, then I would strongly consider a different trajectory.
I think my contribution to perfect, so I probably spent the first half of my career, including my time in college, striving for external reinforcement and thinking about how to be perfect, right? And I have 3 Ivy League degrees. I was valedictorian in high school. I was student body president in college. I got a prestigious job in finance coming out of school. And all of that time, I was so focused on achieving that I didn't always ask myself what I wanted to achieve in the first place. And I think that it's really easy to get caught up in perfection and performance and doing better, but if you're climbing a ladder that isn't even a ladder you want to be on in the first place, you're focused on the wrong things. And so I think spending time thinking about how do I want to spend my time on this planet, who do I want to surround myself with, and then thinking about the paths to excel, certainly not in the goal of perfection, but in the goal of progress. I think that's a really worthy endeavor for people who are building and growing in their careers.
If I can add to that really quickly, something I've always said to everyone I've mentored is the way to think about your career path is first you think about what's the life I want to have, And then you back yourself into, well, what career will let me have this life that I want to have, right? It shouldn't really be the other way around. Your life is way bigger than the career, so let's picture the life, and then let's put the pieces of that life together. You know, what does the family look like? Where do you live? What do you do? Where do you study? And then it's so much easier to make decisions that are led from a more holistic place. On the topic of perfect, this is, again, it goes back to the imposter syndrome. So I've actually never struggled with perfect because I learned a long time ago as a child. And when I compared myself to other people, I realized, he's not perfect. And he's not perfect. So why do I need to be perfect? I need to be good enough to get to the next level. And that's what I'm gonna do, right? Because what I'm focused on is the progress. I'm not focused on being perfect at this thing. And so, which by the way is the rule of the game for most men, okay? Men are not thinking about, I need to be perfect. I think there's a really interesting stat that says when a man looks at a job description, if they meet like 50% or 60%, don't quote me, it's something outrageous, of the bullets, they're like, yeah, I'm qualified, I'll figure out the rest.
Like 35%.
It's something ridiculous. It's something that makes you want to fall out of your seat, right? And women need to check all the boxes and maybe a little more to feel like I might have a shot. And that is something that is just not true. And how I have, it's just an issue of comparison. Every time I walk into a room and I think about, my colleague, my friend, my brother, and I'm like, these people are not perfect. And somehow they're CEOs, they're entrepreneurs, they're whatever they are, and they've gotten there just fine. I need to also follow the same rules. And I think it's so liberating when you realize that you actually are not rewarded for perfection. You are rewarded for progress.
Love that. Are we good on time? Can we get some more questions? Anyone else have questions?
I'll take one. Yeah. Get ready. Just kidding. So the title of this, my name is Michelle, by the way, with one L. Industry Leading Women, which was probably chosen as a title for the panel to set the tone. I'm gonna change it to a question. Is the industry leading women? I have my own violent opinion on that, but I want to hear from Try not to use any of the words that have been stricken from our language by the current administration.
By industry, I'm assuming you mean marketing, advertising. I think we're in a terrible place.
Yeah.
I think we're in a terrible, terrifying place. I think that at its core, marketing as a function, as a business, as an idea, is supposed to be in response to culture, community, people. And if you have to ignore the diversity of the culture, the people, and the community, then you actually can't do marketing. And so I think our entire industry is in tremendous peril. From that philosophical perspective, it has business implications, it has implications in terms of careers and people's lives. It's much bigger than our industry. I also think that as an industry, we have this enormous responsibility because we are at the forefront of culture, because we are the people that make ads, that create content, that tell stories, to continue to tell the stories that reflect the people that actually live on the planet. And if we actually do not stop doing that, in and of itself, that is resistance to what I think is an extremely dangerous path that really threatens everybody, not just women, not just people of color, not just LGBTQIA, if any one of these people, any one of a group of people are threatened, really threatens humanity. And that's, I think, how serious it is right now.
My build is there are many ways to accomplish the same goal. The time right now calls for a different set of skills to accomplish the goals that we need to accomplish. And so, given what's happening in culture at the moment, what we've decided to do is focus on things that we know will get approved because you ultimately are helping businesses drive bottom line, right? When in marketing, you're trying to sell a product, a service, et cetera. And so it's not okay with me as a human that we are where we are, but I know as a leader that I can tell the stories and make the impact that I need to by playing the game that I need to play today to get the outcome that we need to tomorrow. That's what I'd say.
Interesting. Any other questions? All right, so I want to end on just like a practical, like, sorry, missed you.
Hi. How do you navigate fitting into the boxes that have been set upon us from future leaders and also past leaders that are setting the tone of where conversations are going?
I didn't hear the question.
How do you navigate fitting into a box based on where conversations are going? So my response to that is you don't fit into the box. You define who you are, what you bring to the table, what your impact can be to the organization. And if that organization doesn't want you to achieve that impact, then find another organization that will. Because there are plenty of people out there that will embrace you as a way to, for whatever impact, whatever role, et cetera it is. I think, again, I'll come back to the firing yourself of the 80%. It's not what you do day to day, but it's the impact that you can make on the business. And if you market yourself in that way and you come with your full self, you'll find a home that values you.
I want to add to that. I know I'm talking too much, but this is like, I love this topic. On a pragmatic level, I agree with what you're saying. On a practical level, there's a cost to that.
Yeah.
What she just said
There's a
costs. And what it costs is there will be jobs you won't get.
Yep.
There will be organizations where you won't be able to succeed.
Yep.
There will be cultures that will spit you out. And that's the price, right? And so the question is that a price you're willing to pay in order to be your full self and have the full experience and for sort of freedom that you want, or not? And if it is, great, and you'll eventually find a place that will embrace that. And if not, know you're paying the price. And the other price is you're gonna have to play a role, navigate some really difficult lines, maybe not be your full self at work. And that's a choice that we all make, and we make different choices on that, by the way. The same person will make different choices on that depending on where they are in their life, where they are in their situation, what they can afford. So we're having a really philosophical conversation, but there's a real practical element to this, which is, we all need to provide in some way for ourselves and for our family. And so how do we do this? And what am I willing to give up in order to stand in my truth, whatever that truth may be?
I like to end things with just like really quick, like practical advice. What is one thing folks here, whether they're colleagues, allies, women themselves, can do to support one another in the workplace and create a more supportive environment?
Sure. I think especially for me, I think when I first got into this space, there were other founders in the space that just weren't very welcoming, and it kind of set the tone for like what this experience was going to be like for me. And I was like, great, I already hate this. And I think that kind of paying it forward, I've been very conscious of just trying to be friendly to everyone and, get a coffee with them. And actually, like, even if they're in the same exact category or department as you, trying to, see how you can help one another. It doesn't hurt. It actually just feels really great to not go to bed and, or to go to bed and not feel like an asshole. And I think that's helped me a lot, not to be too blunt,
not
but
to feel like an asshole, the main takeaway from today.
Yeah, so feels good.
Yeah. I think mine would be, don't define yourself by your job. A job is a thing that you do, it is not who you are. And I have come to this realization over many years in my career and now as a parent, to the point where I have indoctrinated my kids that if someone asks you what you want to be when you grow up, the answer is not a job. You're not a fireman, you're not a police officer.
Really good.
But the answer is a good person with a good heart. And that's it.
That's
And
great.
So much so that my daughter, in her fourth preschool graduation ceremony in the middle of COVID, they ran a video and they asked all the kids in the class, what do you want to be when you grow up? A heart doctor, a golfer, everything. And my daughter said, I get teary-eyed, but she said at the end, a good person with a good heart.
Oh my God.
And I think and I lost it. But I think if we teach our kids, and honestly teach ourselves, that we are not defined by our jobs, we are defined by the impact that we can have, and just being a good person with a good heart is great enough. That's my advice.
That's a tough act to follow. As a mom with 2 little ones, I'm going home tonight and talking to the kids about what they want to be when they grow up.
Yeah.
It's my takeaway. Look, I think similar to what you said on not feeling like an asshole when you go to sleep at night, if every day you do one thing in service of someone else, it seems like a really simple task, but it will make an incredible difference if every single person in this room one day did one thing. And that can be a tiny thing. It can be sitting in a room where someone else isn't and saying to a founder or their boss, oh, they crushed in that meeting, or they did incredible here, or I don't know, whatever it is. Certainly at the tables that I'm sitting at, making sure that there's equitable pay and those types of important decisions being made to help with some of that. But I think just every day do one thing. It's something that I live by, and it will make a huge difference.
Yeah. So I need to also talk to my daughter because she's 6 and she says she wants to be a CMO and she wants to have CMOers. And I'm like, well, what's a CMOer? And she's like, the people that are on the team of the CMO. And I'm like, okay, girl, let's get it. But I think good heart is probably a better thing for her to aspire to. To follow up on what Taryn just said, actually, in addition to that, keep in touch with people and make one text or phone call or email to someone a day. And I do this every day. I just think of a person and I'm like, hey, like we worked together 7 years ago. Like I was in touch 3 months ago, but how are you? I was literally just thinking about you and I have nothing to ask. There's nothing, I just thought of them. And I reach out, we'll exchange some text messages, and it keeps your relationships alive, and it also helps you feel connected to the world and to understand there's like a broader life out there than the people that you're with every day in your office. And I think having that network and those people that are in your community makes everything better.
Thank you so much. What amazing advice. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to OUTFRONT. I appreciate it.